I've been working with people who are actively suicidal for the last 25 years, and so I have a lot of experience, and I work very well. I'm very good at what I do.
The first time I felt that I was different because I didn't know what reason that would be. I just felt that something wasn't right. I was actually really young, about 9 years old. I went to the school counsellor. It's not the school counsellor, the school nurse, because I'll be 30 next year, so you can imagine this is early 90s or so. And said something's not right. Everybody's different to me, and everybody's looking at me, and I don't feel comfortable with anything. And it all started from then. But nothing happened between that and puberty. I started to feel more isolated as a teenager, and I didn't have any friends really. I got bullied at school, probably because I walked around like a victim, and I'd say that because that's how I felt all the time. And then I suppose it became a normal way for me to think. It almost became a crutch to feel insecure and to feel different to everybody else. My early 20s, I was in my early 20s, I was what the doctors told me I was borderline, basically. I went to the doctors and I said, I have got a serious problem. I switch off, I don't know what's happening, I'm suicidal, I cut myself, I plan to kill myself on a weekly basis. I don't remember conversations or arguments I've had. I am terrified all the time. I was getting palpitations, I was passing out in the street because I was anxious about everything all the time. It all caved in. Just the teenage years, the adolescence, everything else had just taken its toll. But I was reasonably happy. I had a good social life, I had a lovely boyfriend, I had fun. It was okay. My parents split up. That might have had something to do with it. But other than that, I thought everything was okay. So why should I feel miserable? I think that's what tipped everything off. So I went to the doctors and I said, I've got this problem. I don't know why I feel this way. I've put my boyfriend through hell. And he had to deal with this crazy woman in his flat tearing things up and screaming and breaking glass. I used to stop on the way home from the pub and break mirrors on the floors and be like, I'm just going to do it now. And it didn't feel like attention seeking at the time. I don't recall that being my motive. I remember just thinking, well, I'll just end it now because there's no point in this. It's no point. And a lot of blackouts. So after I'd gone to the doctors and explained all of this to them, they said, you should get a counsellor. And I thought, well, that would be nice to talk to somebody who might be able to unravel all of this and help me a bit. So I had my first appointment with a counsellor, a lady, who did not smile at me once. And I felt, from the moment I sat in the office, and I was open to this experience, I wasn't thinking that this was going to be a bad thing, otherwise I wouldn't have accepted it. I needed help. And she literally looked at her watch, wrote down the time, and then looked at her watch for the last 5 minutes of the half-hour appointment. Half hour is not long enough. And it was like, yeah, you've only got 5 minutes left, so if you could just wrap this up. And I'd only just managed to tell her my name, that I was feeling a bit sad and that I hadn't... I've covered more in the last 10 minutes talking to you than I've covered in that whole half-hour session than I did with her. And I had 3 sessions with her and she was offish all the time. She rolled her eyes and shook her head, but not in a way that was pitying or, empathetic at all. It was just she couldn't be bothered. And so I couldn't be bothered, so I left it. And it got worse. I took a lot of drugs at the time to try and compensate. I suppose that might have been a bit... It was a 50-50. It was fun, and it also stopped me from cutting myself because I could get so high that it didn't matter. If it didn't matter. Nothing mattered for days on end. So that didn't help, obviously, because if you mix amphetamines with feeling completely awful, I started to fit even worse. I call it fitting because that's exactly what it was like. And the moment I decided that wasn't going to happen anymore, I'd been found in my flat upside down on the stairs, dribbling, and I don't even know how I got there. I wasn't drunk, I hadn't taken any drugs, I just was purely had enough of everything. And these people came home and they put me back in my room. My flatmates were awful, they were absolutely awful people. They just shoved me back in my room, and I thought, well, this is a good time to go, I think. I've hit an all-time low, I've been found, and I might as well. But then I was stopped in my tracks because I thought about my brother, just like that. And I thought, how have I gone through my whole entire life not thinking about how this would affect my brother? So I stopped. And I said, I'm not doing this anymore, because if I kill myself, my brother is going to be sad. I don't want him to be sad. So that stopped me for a bit. And I thought, fuck this, basically. I'm not going to do this, I need to change. So I rang my dad, and I said, Dad, I need to come home, I can't live in this flat anymore, I'm taking too many drugs, I'm unhappy, no one's helping me. He didn't understand at all, but he came the next day and he picked me up. We threw my stuff out the window, we got in that car and we went like Starsky and Hutch back to his house, and it was amazing. I went and lived with him for a while, so I felt like a failure and everything else. But the more I lived there and the more I wasn't in that horrible environment, I decided to do things like go back to college. I went back to college 4 times. I didn't complete any of the courses I went on. I just carried on and kept going. And I decided to go travelling. I just kept building myself up, basically. The more things I could do to make myself feel good, I did them. And sometimes they were a little on the destructive side, but they mostly built me up.
There's a gap in the provision of the statutory services, and that's not a new thing. It's been there all through my active clinical practice. And the gap is that what the statutory services provide is containment. They do it very well, and it's an absolutely essential part of the process. It's the containment initially which does prevent people from killing themselves if they're kind of right on the edge of things. So it's an absolutely necessary step. The bit that's missing is the therapeutic intervention that helps people change and grow and become more able to cope with their lives, or indeed change their lives so they're not in a suicidal state. That's the part which we're proposing to add to the current situation.
I think the Sanctuary Project is a much needed facility for people who are suffering from mental illnesses or disturbances of any sort. I say that because there's so many different things, you can't pigeonhole certain feelings, and some people don't want to be pigeonholed as depressed or suicidal. They just feel that way and they need someone to talk to. And if they don't have someone to talk to that knows what's going on, they're going to end up being one of those people that are depressed and suicidal and having nowhere to go. And there's not enough support for people who go to the doctors or to the hospital from a suicide attempt or for anything like that, or because they're depressed, who recognise that it's a problem within themselves that they can only fix, because it all comes from the inside out. I believe it comes from the inside out if you want to start healing yourself. The Sanctuary Project, I think it's very aptly named, because I think to teach people that they are their own sanctuary is extremely important.
Part of the process of the Sanctuary Project will be enabling people to feel more in touch with the process that they're going through. Sometimes the containment produces a sense of isolation and disconnectedness, and that's absolutely the wrong direction of feeling and experience for someone who's feeling suicidal. What's needed is connectedness. There needs to be a sense of feeling and experiencing being heard and understood. That takes time. And one of the things that we will be ensuring happens is that there is enough time for everybody to be able to express themselves, to feel like they've got the connection. And generally speaking, people who feel connected don't kill themselves, and part of the initial process is to bring them into connectedness with us so that we can then continue that work. And hopefully that as time goes on and people work through the system that they come through, what we intend to do is to give them the opportunity to come back in as workers so that they can put something back in and contribute, because they've got the real knowledge about what it's like to be on the edge of dying.